So first and foremost, I thank all of you for coming here. I know how difficult it is to get out in Mumbai and come to this. I must confess I've attended only one other Junoon, and I must confess that I've attended only one other Junoon, and that was the great Sarika Joshi at Soumya College in Ghatkopar, and there are more people here than for her. So kudos to all of you, and she is the great, Santoor Angili, and somebody we all look up and legend. I'm happy here also because this is Sanjana's new baby. For somebody like me, I joined theatre because of her mother. Was completely besotted by her, and I think that was the reason I, started doing theatre. And then I think one of the reasons I continued doing theatre was because of Sanjana. She produced a play of mine, which because of her I think went on to do thousands of shows, I think, and so that was fun. And then of course when Junoon was born, I actually thought for a very long time it was Juhoon, not Junoon, and then it got corrected. So anyway, my name is Ramu. Basically I write plays, sometimes I also direct plays. So there are about 25 plays I've written officially, and about 25 which I've written unofficially. These are ghost written. And the really nice thing about ghost written plays is you can also write critiques about them. So you can really with that. So that's fun. And so this is something one has picked up from Joe Orton, that you can rip apart your own work, and there's no greater joy in that. So what I'm also a journalist. That's what I do for a living. And in the past 30 years or so, I've been fortunate enough to meet a few people, interact with them. And what I'm going to try to do today is really share a few things that I've picked up as I've gone along. This is over languages, over years, over different kinds of plays, etc. So to make life easy for me and you, there are 26 alphabets in the English language, so A to Z. I've given each alphabet an anecdote, and then that's how it is going to be. So 26 little anecdotes about Mumbai, and there'll be some of it which some of you would be familiar with, but I think a couple of it would probably be new for you. So we'll start off with A. Tanvi is going to help me with this. She's the one who's created this little PPT for me, because I don't know how to do it. So A is for Ambedkar and A is for Ambedkari Jalsa. There's a specific reason I've started with this. Ambedkar, as you know, has been in the news, the 125th birth anniversary. These are photographs which transpired at the BIT Chawl in Lower Parel. This is a typical Ambedkari Jalsa. Innumerable reasons, I think, to mention Ambedkar, as I mentioned, the 125th year. But I think far more important is if one needs to understand this city. I mean, the city belongs to everyone. The city is, is a fairly young city. To understand the city, I think if we are able to understand what Ambedkar's position and role was in it, I think our understanding of Mumbai gets better. The city has given birth to many people, but there have been 2 or 3, great individuals who have really contributed to the city. Ambedkar being one of them, Gandhi. The entire struggle that he had from 1915 to about 1947, again, innumerable contribution from the city of Mumbai, and what they both did in terms of a partnership. And likewise it was with Ambedkar. The period between 1920 and 1950 is, if you can look at it as the great Ambedkar years, you would understand the work that he did. So here is a great man who returns from the US, Columbia University. He's an economist, as you know, he's probably the first great PhD in economics. Comes back, is perturbed with the question of caste, and among other things. He's also sort of tackling 2 or 3 other bigger issues which are related to do with what is going to be the structure of the Indian government or the Indian governance. He's tackling and interacting with the British Empire at the same time. And third is his own personal plight, what he encountered while he was in a small little town near Satara, to what happened to him subsequently when he went to Baroda and so on. So these are some of the concerns, and these are the concerns that come out in terms of his pouring. So 3 things happen, and I think they get reflected in this. When he returns, he comes out at almost at the age of 22. He writes a very tiny book called The Theory of Caste, which I think is absolutely crucial to read. But he realizes it's extremely difficult to reach these thoughts across to a society which is 80%, majority is, Hindus, dominant Hindus, or his own people who are not in a position to listen to him. So he creates a form, which is a cultural form called the Ambedkari Jalsa. He realizes that he can use a bit of the Pavadas. The Pavadas till then are a form which are ballads and so on. but they're primarily forms which are used to celebrate the heroic, king. He decides he can start telling the stories of the oppressed people. He also realizes this is a way to attract people to come into the audience. Okay, so he Kabir Panth, Povadas, Bharuch, and he starts doing these performances. So typically these would be 4 to 6 hours in the evenings outside chawls. They would also be outside industrial mill gates. They would be in the Maidans. Okay, proper full-fledged performances. So you would have an academic or a serious thinker like an Ambedkar or one of his contemporaries who talk 15-20 minutes on issues of caste, on issues of equity, issues of jurisprudence, basically educating the people in the audience, and simultaneously these performances would take place. Alright? This was something that he was able to do in terms of developing, and as we go to the other slide you will realize that cadre building has been a very, very crucial part of Mumbai, and performance in theatre, formally and informally, from Tilak to Gandhi to, Dange, each of these people have contributed immense, in terms of the amount of work that they poured into this. So this is what he did. Again, the reason for selecting, so these photographs are being shot by a young actor from DSM. So this is happening at DIT Chawl. Again, it's interesting because this is the place where he launched the Mahat Satyagraha. Interesting because you have about 500 people watching this performance. That is Dhama over there. He's the son of Shahir Randive. And over 4 hours, he's telling us stories from Maharashtra. What is happening in Vidarbha, what is happening in Beed. They've come from Beed the previous day, where they performed for about 2,500 people. This is happening in your city, and it happened 100 years ago. It continues to happen now. The reason to include this photograph is in the next lane is Damodar Hall. Damodar Hall, as you know, was among other things a working class hall in Lower Parel, but it's also on the second floor of that hall where the RSS in a way conspired to kill Gandhi. Okay, so it is because of the presence of a performance like this that you have a counterpoint in the city where for every voice that is trying to sort of squash certain values or propagate certain values, you have values of this which is questioning that and challenging that. And the third thing is that there are also the interesting thing with Ambedkar that you will notice, and again with Dhamma's performance it comes through, is that the issue of nationalism. Because when Ambedkar returned from the US, the same thing was happening. You had Madan Mohan Malviya's notion of what nationalism was, Gandhi with his own peculiar kind of Gandhiism which existed, Tilak had his own notion of Gandhiism, and you had these institutions which were being formed again in Mumbai. So if you look at it, 1915 was Hindu Mahasabha, 1925 was the Communist Party of India. So you have organizations, the Indian National Congress, as you know, was 1885. So all these organizations are being formed, and with them you are having these diktats that are being created. You have some performances like this which are questioning that whose nation and whose nationality is it. It happened in 1920 when he returned. It's also happening now, even on the 125th year. So we move to the next slide. I know this was a bit heavy, but I just thought we'd start with Ambedkar because he just is very, very important. So Mumbai has been a city of playwrights, and again I thought I'll introduce one unknown playwright, one avant-garde playwright, and one very popular playwright. Without any doubt, I think Shakespeare remains by far the best and most popular playwright that Mumbai, India owns, as followed surprisingly by Brecht. Brecht is, I think, number 2 in terms of, and again these are playwrights that have been co-opted and Indianized. Badal Babu, Badal Sarkar, is again someone who has been is hugely popular in Mumbai, especially among the intercollegiate circuit. His one-act plays are almost cult plays, and it was only, I think, when I was probably in my mid-20s that I realized that Badal Babu is actually not a Bengali, because I always thought he was not a Maharashtrian. I always assumed that he was a Marathi Manas and we were just doing his plays left, right and center. It was much later that I came to know that and understood what total theatre was and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that enormous contribution in terms of the entire pantheon of plays. The playwright at the end is somebody called Betab, Narayan Prasad Betab. So this is again a little booklet I was able to pick up at the NSD at their bookstore. And so two aspects to it. One is, of course, this is the period between 1890s and 1920, where you're seeing a certain kind of institutionalization of theatre. So 2 or 3 things are happening in Mumbai at that time. Again, interesting insights because it provides a context to what happens subsequently. One is professionalization of theatre in terms of groups, in terms of people being paid, in terms of the manner in which these shows are being performed. The second thing is payment structures. Again, what we found is that, and in this little booklet you find that Betab talks about the kind of salaries that playwrights used to get in those days and how they had to sort of bargain for 5 rupees, 10 rupees, 20 rupees. And finally when he leaves this great city, I think his salary is something like 750 rupees. Later he returns, he writes a film and that's again 1500 rupees. This is also the same period when Munshi Premchand is in Mumbai and he's also getting a enormous salary of about 1,500 to 2,000 rupees for writing scripts. And the interesting thing is the Hindi playwrights to a large extent hated Mumbai. They did not like this city. It's the Urdu playwrights who enjoyed the city, they loved the city, but it's primarily the Hindi playwrights had a sense of that the city was hell. It was the equivalent of hell for them. And that got reflected in a lot of the writing or the angst that they sort of expressed. The third thing is that the scripts, again he writes about it a lot, I won't go into great detail because we have many more alphabets to go to. Mainly it was, again this is interesting, but it was plays were written in Gujarati and then either translated into Urdu, and Urdu plays were also written in Gujarati. So you again can see the journey that as a city we have made and what has happened subsequently.
Hey, Beckett.
Beckett was just a little coded sort of thing. So there's a little thing about Beckett. So this is the great Irish playwright Samuel Beckett. The anecdote is really the first woman actress on Mumbai was an Irish lady. Till then it was only men, and so that was the sort of little hidden word. And the second thing is, every play that I write, I borrow a line from Beckett, and the plays in which I haven't borrowed a line from Beckett, those plays have been terrible. It's now superstition. This is a guru, a friend of mine. So one of the things I've learned is that if you want to really understand theatre, you have to have khabris. And khabris cannot be actors because actors, I think, generally are too, we don't have many of them here in the room, but they're generally too full of themselves. I don't like them. Critics are limited because they have a job to do. But khabris are basically people who are on the beat. So you get a sense of what's happening with box office, whose shows are running, who's rehearsing, the gossip in the theatre, where, what kind of props, furniture, what is the look and feel. So Chandan is somebody like that for me. He comes from a small little town in Kolhapur. He's not an actor, he's a makeup person. He's done about 2,500-3,000 shows of Vastraharan, which is like a cult play, which did about 5,500-6,000 shows. It's one of the brilliant most farces I've ever seen on the Marathi stage, any stage. He's also done about 1,500 to 2,000 shows of another play called Sahi Re Sahi. And one of the great lessons I learned from him was his makeup box. So he does makeup for. So Vastraharan is about the Mahabharata. So as you can imagine, you have all those Kauravas and so many Pandavas. So you have at least 20 people who eat tadi. So he had this big box, and it was a play, I think, which was a kind of mythological on Ramayana, and Ram had just one little corner, and they said, Ram so evadas ka, and baki konacha hai? He said, they Ravana sir. They said, why so many? The answer, daha hai na. So I mean, the thing is, you get a sense of how the craft of theatre is. So that was number one, I think, lesson that I learned. The other thing that I learned from him was also duration of roles for actors. I think during that show, he told me that Lakshman actually has more playing time than Ram on stage. And these are the little things, that sometimes they just crack a script for you, and then when you reading Shakespeare or whatever, then you suddenly realize the sort of dynamics of how playwrights are approaching. So that's about him. The reason I've used that particular word called theory of graded inequality is, again, that goes back to Ambedkar. It's a long theory. If you read that, you could probably get a sense. But it's also to understand that if you're looking at the economics of theatre today in Mumbai, so we keep using numbers, we're talking numbers, etc. So it depends on who you talk. The entire construct of the theatre in Mumbai, the numbers vary, but it could be anything between 80 crores to 120 crores, which is a sizable industry. Out of which Marathi would be about 45 to 50 crores. These are all, again, guesstimates, these are not fixed numbers. Somewhere down the line, there is a Chandra Patil who's getting his sort of monthly income or monthly pay packet out of this. So it could be 15,000, it could be 20,000, 25,000 and so on. There is a payment structure that is trickling down.
The reason I say graded inequality is because of the structure of the pyramid, the way who controls the box office and who dominates the box office. There is a certain way and a system and a mechanism which is at work, and why a Chandar Patil will be what he is 100 years ago and maybe 100 years later. That is, I think, a question that we need to ask. Because I think in terms of intelligence, what they bring to theatre is remarkable. It's just that it is a different kind of aesthetics. Sorry, this is a homage to a small play and an old friend. He used to stay in Villaparla East. So this is a play called Dungaji House, and I think I saw Vasar somewhere here and there. Yeah. So they're doing the Sultan Padamsee Playwriting Award again, and this play won that award. So the reason why I think this play is exceptional is because just the sheer quality. So we, sometimes we keep sort of raising the flag of Indian English theatre. I write my plays in English as well, and the quality of writing is sometimes not very good. I mean, one has to be brutally honest about that. And this is one of the rare plays which I think epitomizes the greatness of what writing is. And it's a play which, whether you plonk it in Paris, you plonk it in New York, you plonk it wherever, this is the play that is a testament. The reason to include it is not that. It's a critique of the play, but it's an interesting pattern of what actually happens on Mumbai stage. A lot of the plays are actually about living rooms, and Cyrus has been able to exceptionally highlight that. What happened was, at the time this play got written, you suddenly found a pattern where about 6 to 7 other such plays were being performed and similar. So there was somebody called Uttam Gada, if you've heard of him in Gujarati. He wrote a play which was in those days produced and enacted by Paresh Rawal. It was called Mulraj Mansion. So this play is transpiring in a Parsi community area that is that's happening in the Gujarati businessman community. And there are a couple of things that are, one is the dynamics of what is space. Whose space is it? Whose homes are we living in? That is a bigger question. And the second thing is the dramas that are transpiring within that, in these family homes. If you look at a lot of the Marathi commercial stage even today, it is still living room centric. And it's plays like this that epitomize what you can do with that particular form and structure. There's again a long treatise on this, because I think these are also plays, you have urban theory about how a city is, how a city evolves, etc. But you have plays like this that are able to provide you an insight into what homes are. What do these things, these four walls mean, and what does it mean for the inhabitants in them, and how has society evolved? How has a suburb sort of grown or not grown in a particular kind of way? And somewhere I find that if cinema is not able to capture that, or great literature is not able to do that, theatre with this kind of a form is able to do that. Okay, so this is a little contentious. So I was, in the beginning when I started off with A for Ambedkar, I did mention to you that the communists were sort of at the bastion of some of what Ambedkar had to offer to the city. So in 1925, again, just to give you a context, I think the Communist Party of India was formed. For those of you who are fairly young, the first mill that came, cotton mills that came into Mumbai was in 1853. By the time the last mill left, there were about 150 odd mills all over Mumbai. Okay, and a few things happened. So what you have to understand is that you suddenly had an influx of people who came into the city and literally created the city. So that was one part of it. These were migrants. Most of them came from Konkan. A lot of them came from hinterland of Maharashtra. And then the working conditions were terrible, alright, for a lot of them. And these were people basically in the textile trade where they were converting cotton into different forms of, bed sheets and saris and shirts and so on. When we realized that the condition was sort of improper, the trade union, the working class got themselves organized, and you had trade unions which were formed, and they used to defend the rights, so ensure minimum wages, and so on. So 2 or 3 things were happening at that particular point of time. When these mills were being formed, you had a lot of trade union organization across all the mills in Mumbai. Alright, and along with that, the party was making sure that the Communist Party was making sure that these workers had entitlement. Not only that, but they also could do their performances and things like that which were happening around that time. So this is an iconic photo. Sorry, I just jumped ahead. This is an iconic photo. This is the great Mr. Dange. Some of you might have heard of him. So this is the great big strike. The question a lot of us have been asking is that while whatever has been happening in the country is happening, two things have happened to Mumbai. One is the sort of decline of the left, which is palpable. And the second is that also the kind of cultural context and the cultural resonance which they brought to the city, the songs, the playwrights, the poems, and etc. Where has all that vanished? So there are two or three theories. One is this, big disconnect that the left started having with the workers themselves, all right, at these industrial mills. So obviously some of the mills were suffering and therefore, it had a certain impact. But the second thing, why is it that the left struggled to keep hold to this? Because along with not just the, the lives and livelihoods of these people, you certainly found that a great big cultural sort of movement collapsed. This particular thing is important also. If you look at Gandhi, and Gandhi will keep coming back because he's crucial to this city. See, Gandhiism, to a large extent, his funding came from a lot of the textile mill owners of Mumbai, the philanthropists, the patrons, and so on, which is again one of the sort of untold histories of the great Gandhian movement. The second thing is a lot of the backbone to Gandhi's Indian National Congress movement were the working class of Mumbai. The third is that Mumbai itself provided a kind of hotbed for Gandhi for generating a lot of his ideas. So whether it was Quit India later, whether it was even contemplation for the Dandi, whether it was this sort of protest against the Rawal attack, a lot of that originated in the streets of Mumbai and what he sort of picked up in terms of the energy of the working class. So why did the left fail? I'll just quote somebody because I think it's urgent to say it's crucial. So this is again somebody a lot of us admire. This is a poet he was from Matunga labor camp. Some of you must have heard of him. He's Narayan Surve. He's also a balladier and a poet. So he said that the left never took a clear stand, and I think this is important because a week ago I was sort of traveling across in North, and they said that ultimately there will be two forces left in India. One will be a very, very strong and powerful right, and one will be an equally strong and powerful left. So, I mean, this is something that we need to consider, that if there is going to be any form of sort of, dissent, opposition, or even any form of engagement with the existing form of governance, then we need this. So what Surve says is our party never took a clear stand. I feel very strongly that the Indian left should study the conditions in this country properly. They should read Marxism, but they should also read Ambedkar. They have no idea as to how to link it with the specific cultural and social historical questions of this country's history. The caste question, the movements against the system, the Charvak, the Buddha. What is our approach to all this? What is our approach towards Shivaji? Did he not make significant contributions to our history? Were there no such thing as a progressive Hindu? What about the Dalits, the tribals, the peasants? There are some specific demands of these sections. They have been culturally marginalized for centuries. How is the left planning to fight that? What was our approach to Jyotiba Phule? What is our approach to B.R. Ambedkar, who fought on this? We keep on talking about the working class, that's it. But they only related with us on economic issues and sometimes on political issues, but we are not with them at the social and cultural level. So, something like that. In terms of culture and theatre, what does this have to do? I think again 2 or 3 things started happening. One is, if you realize, a lot of the left theory came in from the West. So if you look at sort of the theory of Marx and so on, that was one aspect of it. But even the form of theatre that they did, a lot of it was Brechtian. And I think, if you look at what happened in Mumbai in the 70s, we'll say groups like the Avan Natya Manch and so on. Post the formation of, say, the Dalit Panther movement in the 70s, you began to realize that there was a deep amount of questioning even about that what should be the form that should be used, especially when we are doing any kind of cultural resistance. So those European forms of that kind of praxis was not only questioned but overthrown. The kind of songs, the kind of reference points to use, whether we should be looking at a Eurocentric model for our fights, our battles, plus how do we address the question of caste. I mean, that became a huge question, especially in Mumbai. This man again was at the forefront of that. So actually there was a video link that we had where he talks about this. This is Namdev Dasal. Again, problematic for many people, not for me. I mean, many people call him Marathi Chana Bandukhor Manta Tani. A great poet, a taxi driver who went on, who was from the area of Kamatipura and wrote his famous cult classic called Golpitha. So we had a video link where he actually talks about what I'm going to share next, because we just thought it would be a break. But that video, that video link vanished or not, disappeared. Besides writing great poetry and being one of the sort of patrons of the Dalit Panther movement in the 70s, he obviously knew two things. One is he knew his cultural theory. And that is, I think, something that a lot of us feel, that if you're really going to be at the forefront of really creating great theatre or mounting these great productions, you have to understand the cultural genesis of the city. What is the city, who does it belong to, and why do we do what we do? So I've been extremely fortunate, because with him we had an opportunity to take a tour around those parts of Mumbai. He knows it inside out. So Kamatipura, again, very interesting. One of the things that he shared is the area was called Kamatipura mainly because the Kamatis came there. These are mainly migrant laborers from Andhra, and they are the guys who built our city. So I mean, we give credit to the Hiranandaris and the Rahejas, but it's these guys who are the construction workers who built these cities. And then, of course, when they come in there, along with that, the songs, the plays, the skits, and what have you. So one of the times when he took us there, it was, I think, the first month or something, and you had about 200 or 300 of these Andhraite laborers who were sort of collected in a huge circle. And while we were watching them, around 350 of them started crying. It was like a collective crying, alright? And then after that collective crying got over, so the reason they were collectively crying was because these are the people who had come from the village, and some of them were going back to the villages. And they were collectively crying because they were weeping for all the people in the last 2 months who had passed away. Anyone who had passed away. So it was like a collective mourning for that. And then after that they had a sort of celebration in which they talked about all the people who were born, the marriages and so on. And then after that the show and the performance begins. And again a little bit of text and so on. Now this is a sort of dilemma. So he turned to us and he asked, so how kai? A performance kinai hai? Because he knew that we were from the theatre. And again it is problematic. What do you define this as? Is this, because it is evolving, it is regular, it is not a ticketed event. It's happening in an open playground. And of course it's happening in Telugu, but so that is that. Again, interesting because, and I am going to mention this specifically because as some of you are aware that his affiliations and lineage, his affiliations later on went towards the Sena, that is Shiva Sena. So he joined the party formally and did a lot of work with them. And this is something a lot of us have had problems with. The Sena's history and politics we all are familiar with. It's ultra-right, militant and so on. Having said that, two things happened to two of the greatest icons in Marathi poetry and Marathi literature. One is Dasal himself. That how is someone who is sort of Marxist Ambedkarite making this shift and going to Sena? That was one. And how did somebody like Narayan Surve, who was again a Marxist, born into a Marxist family, a member of the party, etc. Again, towards the last years of his life, you had the Sena MLA sort of funding him. He's living in the house, which is sort of taken care of by a Sena, member of the Legislative Assembly. And these are questions I think we need to ask ourselves as to what. And sometimes, even with the Sena, discarding whatever the role that they played in the downfall of the left, especially 60s and 70s, and subsequently whatever else they did in 91, 92. It's a very strangely postmodern party, and their sort of role in Mumbai's history and in Mumbai's politics sometimes is sort of perplexing. So we also had the misfortune of being at the funeral of both these people, and again I want to share this because again it's as you know, Surve was the last, this is of course Dasal, but Surve was the last part of his life suffered. He almost didn't have a roof over his head, and he was living on sort of subsidized money, etc. And then when he passed away, the Shok Sabha was at the Bhupesh Gupta Bhavan, and as usual, all the greats, the chief ministers, the deputy chief ministers, etc., everybody came for that. And finally, the body was being taken to the electric crematorium. This is one of those sort of, we keep questioning what is the role of art, what is the role of an artist, especially in today's context in Mumbai. So the body is being taken, it's going through the Portuguese church area towards the crematorium. It was really a dismal kind of a funeral procession, you know. There were a few of us, and there were some people at the back, you know, very apologetically doing Lal Salam, you know. He was a member of the left. And, you know, this is something I must share with you. When Kanhaiya did his little speech at JNU, for the first time I realized how Lal Salam must be said, you know. Till then I always assumed that Lal Salam was a really very apologetic way of saying Lal Salam. And it was also then, when Kanhaiya said it, I began to realize that, oh, that is where Shiv Sena got their Awaz Konacha. You see, when you're talking of, you know, cultural slogans being played out in the streets of Mumbai, in the districts of Mumbai, where what is coming from and who's borrowing from what. So anyway, the Surve procession is going on. There are about 100 of us on the streets, and there's, I think it was Subodh or somebody. He starts singing one of the songs that Surve had written, and he's just saying it as a chant. And the next thing, and this is a very ordinary sort of non-descriptive suburb of Mumbai. And suddenly you find that there are people who are coming to the pavement and they're asking "Kaun gela vagera vagera," and the words that he's saying is actually being picked up by people on the street. They actually know the words, and that strikes you as completely astonishing. That here are people who never sort of given great thought to their literary merit and their this thing, and they know the words of somebody, and they seem to know 2, 3 of them. So here is this situation where this body is going by of one of the greatest poets of the land, and you have ordinary people on the street singing that. It's a really, it sort of makes you question about this whole thing about what literature is and what is the importance of it. And then the next thing that happens is, of course, the body is taken to the crematorium ground. Here's a poet who, stands against everything that the state stands for, and they gave him a 21-gun salute or something. And there are a few of us who are joking that he would completely be disgusted by this and probably get off that thing and walk into the sea. So a little more of history lesson, because so I've been sort of going on and on about the left. I'm not a member of the party, I'm not a card holder. There are people in the family who claim to be that, I'm not. There's somebody who claims to be a Trotskyite. So anyway, so 1885 is Congress, alright. Prior to that, something has happened, which is 1857, which is mutiny, and post that there is a huge clampdown on cultural shows and performances. Okay, there is the DPA, the Dramatic Performance Act, comes into specifically Mumbai and Maharashtra, because this is the hotbed of where a lot of the theatre is. And essentially, what does this mean? It means that performances of plays are under the radar, under the surveillance of the government, which means that certain things that you can. So you don't have a very powerful print media at that time. There are, but that is again under the radar, and whatever is being printed is again being watched. So in about 1990, Tilak in Pune, with his sense of Indian nationalism, realizes 2 things. That one is, we need to build the cadre. We need to have a strong voice of opposition against the atrocities, and there's got to be a messaging system which sort of passes on. So as you know, he creates the Sarvajanik Ganpati Mandal. Now the reason I mean today, of course, it has a particular avatar, a particular kind of a root, but the thing is that what he is able to do at one go, almost it takes him about 10 to 12 years, is mobilization. Alright? He uses those 10 days mainly for mobilization for Congress cadre. And this is something that we need to understand, that even today's International Congress, whatever, Rahul Congress, Indian Congress, it is, the cadre base is still holds its sort of, lineage to a lot of what Tilak created, and of course subsequently what Gandhi took forward in terms of just the cadre base. I'm not talking only the Mumbais and so on, but the smaller cities of India. This is the lineage that he created in terms of being able to have an outreach, instant sort of, WhatsApp messaging. This was sort of almost similar to that. So what does he do? During those 10 days, he realizes that there is a huge cultural history that Maharashtra has. So instead of just making it a kind, and in any case, his nationalism does have an overtone of Hindu nationalism as part of it. So the messaging in a way blend. So he combines the two, and he makes sure that these cultural programs are invited. So that is the part, because he realizes that they will come in the name of Ganpati, they will come in the name of the cultural performance. Embedded in that is the messaging. So 2, 3 things happen. A lot of Swadeshi bulletins start coming out. A lot of the curtains and so on that are being used have different kinds of messages, because they know that the police or the lower level officers who are watching these shows are keeping a tab, but they are not able to read the Devanagari script. So you have these performances which are happening, and in between the performances you have these curtains. Again the same system, we started off with A for Ambedkari Jalsa. Where did Ambedkar get his idea? To some extent it was a derivative of this. The only thing was he cleansed it of religion. He got it into a more sort of rational paradigm. And so mainly what they do is, you have 3 to 4 hours shows, you have a kirtan, you have something, and in the midst of that you have this messaging that is constantly going on. That the next movement is going to be there. This is what we are probably talking about. This is what they are doing with the Indian National Congress leaders. This is the bill that the British are passing. So and so was picked up and arrested from the jail. This is what is happening. So this is the kind of messaging that was constantly happening. And where was this happening? It was happening in the chauls. So all your Chinchpokli mandals and all your Baikala mandals, these are the places where this was happening. So this is, I call this the Globe Theatre. This is again right behind Lal Bagh Ka Raja. Those of you who are familiar with Lal Bagh Ka Raja. So this was the bastion of the Tamasha Theatre. This is where it is, and the condition today, it's a small little marriage hall, something similar to what happened to Kabildas is happened to this. The Tamasha movement, the Tamasha Theatre movement is still very strong in Maharashtra. Again, due to a strange local law, which I will not talk to, that will require about an hour and a half. But entry for the Tamasha groups are not allowed inside the city. So again, a very strange contradiction. You have a government in power which talks of the pride of the Marathi Manus and all those other things. But at the same time, there is a certain denial of certain kind of theatre, and you will see that that is a constant pattern, that there is a constant attempt to ensure that some people are not permitted to perform. What I do is, again, you should know this. So I sort of written a povada for a friend, and I had written it in English, and then of course it got sort of translated into Marathi. It just gives you, for those of you not familiar what the form is and what the issue, I mean I can give you a long treatise on it, numbers, statistics and all that. But so I've used the form of the tamasha, and in that same sort of povada form I'm sort of saying, no tamasha this season. So no tamasha this season, says the veteran Tamasgir to me. Tomorrow it's Dasera followed by Diwali. The rice is peaking, the rains are ceasing. But no Dolki ka fat this season. 7 months of silence, 210 dreary days, 210 lonely nights. No sound of the applause, no razzmatazz of lights. 150 theatre companies, they fold the travelling tents, they iron their costumes, they tune their instruments. They tell their children about the ideal prognostications of tamasha, of how tamasha performances entertain the nation. That was then, this is now. 80 jatras, 300 performances, no suparis, no encores for now. No tamasha show this season, says the veteran Tamasgir to me. The numbers don't lie, he unwinds his pagadi. Our artistic reputation can't grow due to inconsistency of cash flow. There are no yearnings, therefore no earnings. Plus there's a no-show from 9 PM to 5 AM, my friend. A court ruling that bans us after 10. Unemployed are the artists, female dancers and singers, all of whom migrate to gambling dens where women are paid more than men. We pay money to the wealthy sahukars, we pay for the diesel, we pay for the car. We pay for rentals, we pay for hiring, we pay for taxes, we pay for complex licensing. We pay for insurance, we pay for bank loans, we pay for costumes, we pay for cell phones. We pay for the generator, we pay for sound and lights. Whatever remains is for government babu's bribes. That's why no tamasha show this season, says the veteran Tamasgir to me. Chirimiri economics, it makes no sense. Paid subsidies are fucking nonsense. There can be no cooperative theatre movement when we are being crushed by our own government. That's why there will be no tamasha show this season, says the veteran Tamasgir to me. Yeah, so this is about one act. I briefly referred to Badal Babu. So he was a huge role model and inspiration, but there were others. Again, this is something unusual to Mumbai. This is Mitibai College. This is my Karma Bhumi. And this is, I think, a rare photograph because one of them has been so anyway, so this is a small play I've written called IMI. Sunil, this was done by Akash. So we've gone. There is a very sweet anecdote where we went to his house with this script, and his house and my house is about maybe 2 minutes away from each other. And by the time I had reached, he'd already called saying, I read the script, I like it, I'll direct it. And for us, it was a big thing. It's called IMI. That's very pretentious. But 2-3 things, and I think this is something not adequate attention is given to. the structure of the one act. So I mean, if those of you who follow cricket, it's very similar to that. You learn to play a 1 day, you learn to play a 2 days, and then you go on to play a 3 days and 5 day test match. So one act plays give you that time and structure, and so for a person like me who started off writing plays, it essentially helped me understand what is the structure for a 30-minute slot, or 30 or a 35-minute slot. And once I got comfortable doing that, I knew I could start writing a 1 hour play, or 90-minute play, and then subsequently do a full-length play. That was one. The second thing is that what you write typically gets performed on the intercollegiate circuit even today. So, and there's a huge network that is, I think, Mumbai again, because of the peculiar shape and size of the city, lends itself to do that. So I think that's again something that's fascinating. And the third thing was there was a lot of peer feedback. I mean, for somebody like us, NM and Mickey Pai, we were it's almost like Pakistan, India. We were very, very strong rivals. I think we had Ashutosh Gawarikar, we had Naushad Mehta, I think they had Mahendra Joshi, Makaran was that. I mean, it was fun. So, but it basically taught us the rigor of doing plays and being competitive and being able to perform that, year after year. And we could get to do about 8 plays in a year, 7 to 8 plays. And if the play was good, then you could do 15, 20 shows, So, I think it helps shape that. And a lot of the names in the pantheon of Indian, especially Mumbai's theatre, if you see, I mean, of course, there are those who've gone out of the country, studied, gone to NSD, etc. But one act has really taught us a lot, in terms of just the sheer rigor of theatre, and learn to respect that. A lot of small things you just pick up because you can do the one act. Fantastic tradition, and I don't think adequate attention is given to that. Again, there are a huge number of playwrights who have written only one act plays, and fantastic one act pieces. Again, this is something, this is a spectacle, and again, this is one of those things I always wonder why it never gets recorded. So this was performed 30 to 35 years ago. The first performance was in Pune at Shaniwar Wada. This is a play about the 17th century great Maratha chieftain called Shivaji Maharaj. And it's a play that talks about how he is this great and fantastic ruler and everything else that is there. It's an absolute fantastic visual spectacle. It's written and penned by Lok Shahid Babasaheb Purandare, who was in the news recently. The entire piece, has anybody seen Janta Raja here? Okay. So the entire piece is on a minus soundtrack, so it's recorded from start to finish. Actors are there, so the actors on stage are coming and miming and all of that. The music score is also punched in advance. The cast is about 250 to 300, that's huge. And you have elephants and horses and fire and all of that. In the initial thing, because again we got to speak to somebody who's handling production for this and gave us a great amount of detail, and it's actually a study in terms of organization. How with limited resources you can mount something like this. So they have something like 40 containers, 40 feet containers, 17 40 feet containers for their entire set. Alright? And again, because they're playing with a lot of fire and everything, it's fully poly-coated. It's again bearable because it needs, it's malleable because it needs to support all these elephants and, big cast and everything. And interestingly enough, all shows, they've done something like 1,000 plus, including for prime ministers and chief ministers and what have you. All shows have always started on time, which is again an exceptional achievement. And the other thing is that they never have a chief guest. The chief guest is Shivaji Maharaj for them. So the reason I'm sort of mentioning this is, the other interesting trivia was 2 days, I met him, this gentleman called Srinivas Virkar. He's a well-known printer in Mumbai and he's handling the sound for this, and later on worked on the Hindi adaptation of this, because this did the Hindi which opened at Agra, and also an English version, they went to Wembley with it and all that. He said that there was absolutely no accidents on this ever. And then unfortunately, this is called, theatre ka, so they had a show opposite Gujarat Society in Vilepalla East, and that was the first time, in case some of you got that. That was a month ago, where there was a small little mishap that they happened, and one of the, I think, plants got burned and they had to stop the show. So the reason to mention this is just the sheer organization that they bring in into doing this. When they do shows in other parts, this is again similar in terms of, so they are of course doing this in terms of an outreach of what Shivaji Maharaj's message is. So that is something that they clear. But there is also something called mobilization. They are trying to involve more and more people in different parts of Maharashtra to get involved with this. So for example, if they're going to Marathwada or they're going to Sholapur or they're going to Gadchiroli, they will have a Reiki team that goes in advance. So as I told you, it has a cost of about 250 to 300. So somebody goes in advance, trains about 100 to 150 people in the minor casts, the minor scenes, the chorus scenes, a little bit of that, a little bit of prop arrangement in the backstage and the wings and so on. So a couple of things are happening. One is you are ensuring that the message goes on and there's somebody in that village who's going to take that forward. And the second thing is by the time the show has landed, there's enough word of mouth so that they get those kind of audiences. Because typically you have, I don't know, the show that you saw how many, but the ones that I've seen, they're like 3,000, 5,000. I mean, the ones that at least in Pune was a huge show. So to get that kind of audience, they obviously need that kind of, mobilization. Again, a very clever way in terms of how you organize your resources and make sure that it's sort of done. A lot of people have tried to imitate that. Historical plays traditionally in Maharashtra have worked very, very well. So, the Peshwai and all that. These are stories that people want to hear. I mean, even if you study Shakespeare, about 50 to 60% of his plays are the great historical characters. So, yeah, again, another fantastic unsung hero. This is something for those who are non-Maharashtrian, this is one of the. So this is today's Lok Satta. And these are the number of plays that are listed, So just for those of you who don't get hold, and again it's a little sad, but there is very, some of these plays that I'm talking of course, a few of the people have written, like Betab has written a biography, then you have, Kolatkar has written this beautiful autobiography called Bahurupi, but these are just little fragments that we are holding on to. There is really little substantiated information and data that is there. Most of it gets wiped out or is personal collection. This man, in that sense, was a sort of huge thing. I call him the Paul Key from Mulund. For the last 35 years, the ads that I just showed you, he's the guy who creates those ads. Right? He single-handedly does, he's done about 2,000 odd plays by now. So those are some of the cult plays over there. So Nata Samrat, as you know, the movie was released recently. So he's responsible for that. Now, so he has a story about each play because obviously he's watching the process. He's involved with the producer and director. And if you see, it's just a single column and two columns that he needs to sort of, convert. The reason he becomes important is that this is an actual visual documentation of our theatre history for the last 30 to 35 years. And he has a lot of that. He has little vignettes and anecdotes about each of these little things. And if you kind of look at what's happened in the West in terms of, I'm going to use the word politically, but poster art has been a sort of form and a form of aesthetics and appreciation for a very, very long time. This is again something that I think we need to value. He's also got a very clear mandate in terms of how he uses the fonts, because that is all he has. He's just got fonts, and till very recently he wasn't even able to do half tones and half lines on those newspaper ads simply because of the way the newspaper production is. Sorry, I'm damaging my...
Ramoji, press pause you for a minute.
Yeah.
Squeeze everybody.
Is this okay what I'm doing?
Tell me something. The page you just showed, that's an ad of all the plays that are currently running.
Right.
Yes. So what kind of places will they be running at? I mean, what kind of halls are they? That's about 20 or 25 coming to
So we have a very simple thumb rule in Mumbai. This is a great city for theatre because theatre needs three things. So most of these halls are either near a railway station, so Prithvi and NCP is an honorable exception. But most theatre, they're not even auditoriums, they're halls. So this will be Dinanaths, the Shivaji Mandirs and so on. So basically they need to be close to a railway station, they need to be close to a bar, and they need to be close to a brothel. These are the three mandates. So to answer your question, we have about 36 or 40 of them all over, including the new cities like Navi Mumbai, Kalyan, Thane, etc. And all of these are households. And typically you will have the Marathi plays, the box office collection for some of these plays now would be anything between 2 to 2.5 lakhs per show. And the Gujarati plays would do fewer number of shows, but the box office collection would be higher. So this is all black. This in cash collection. Yeah, sorry, I was trying to show you this book. So I came across this gentleman called Deepak Ghare, and he's put together this little book in Marathi called Mudran Parva. Mudran is printing and Parva is chapter. And in that he has traced the history of Mumbai, Maharashtra through print. And this has been one of the sort of glorious chapters in that in terms of how. So you looked at people like R.K. Joshi who have done what they've done with typography. You know, the history of typography has been a long one. And especially what these people have done in terms of book covers, in terms of the text. So if you look at books, when you're going out, that particular bookshelf, a lot of that is Rakru Joshi. He's been a master sort of teacher in terms of creation of a lot. So till about the 60s or 70s, because of the shortcomings of you know, computers and fonts and so on, the creativity was not there to the extent that we found with the Roman language, I mean the Roman text. So what R.K. Joshi and the others managed to do is that, and if you look at some of those covers, that is the contribution that they have. That has fortunately got mapped and documented because, again, it was a little more upper class. These plays, because they belong again back to the bottom of the pyramid, this has got sort of neglected. Now there has been an attempt to revive this. If you are able to do this successfully, you actually have a small little museum with these posters that are there for display with little stories, because he's about 80, so it's not long. Yeah, next. Okay, so this is a little quiz for those of you in the audience. So, who are the two gentlemen in the middle? This is a historic photograph. So, that's the great Pablo Neruda, and that's Amar Sheikh. All right. So, I mean, I've been telling you all these stories, and of course, you have to believe me saying that, you know, I've been saying they're greats and they're iconic and so on. So Amar Sheikh is a bus cleaner from Kolhapur. Anubhav Sate was again, you know, just somebody who was working in a mill. So Pablo Neruda comes to India. These are what we call Lok Shahir. Lok is people, Shahir is in a way a kind of a poet. These are people who would stand and sing songs and ballads outside, like I was telling you, some of the earlier photographs that you saw, in the Maidans, outside the industry gates, meetings 2.5, 3 lakh. If there is a sort of a strike in Mumbai, they would go all the way up to Yavatmal and tell a story about that. If they were in Pune, they would, you know, talk about something that's happening in Kolhapur. So newspaper carriers in a way, but telling stories through art. So Neruda comes, and again, those of you who are interested, there is his autobiography, I think it's called Memoirs. There's also a very fantastic description in that of his meeting with Nehru at that time. Then he comes to Mumbai, and you know, as it happens, he meets all the really posh people for the first 2 days, and you know, here we are talking of you know, somebody who is a people's poet himself in his own land. And then he says, all this is great, but where are the real people? And then someone takes him and introduces him to Amar Sheikh, and of course at a performance. And Amar Sheikh doesn't know who this gentleman is, and then this is that particular photograph. So one of the reasons to include it, I mean, you know, I mean, a lot of this could seem like hagiography of a kind. But you know, just a little pause here to say that, so this man here is a Nobel Prize laureate for the body of work you have, and on the other hand you have somebody who is an absolute nobody. You know, and they're probably singing the same kind of songs, writing about the same kind of struggle, the same type of movement. So something has obviously gone wrong somewhere, and you know, we need to ask ourselves this question as to why this has happened. So probably survey, or I don't know what. Maybe we have not told these stories. Okay, so some fun. So, so from all this, it seems to come out that, you know, I'm some deeply agitated political soul in the trouble, which I'm not. So I lead a fairly cool life. And in the mid 80s, what had happened in the 84, I inadvertently got sort of involved in what is called political movement. So there was somebody called Pushpa Mehta who was contesting the elections. And she was, I mean, those of you who know, she's Uday Bhai's wife, and she was contesting from a party called Revolutionary Socialist Party. So my job was to put posters up. So basically this is the area called near Sakinaka Kurla. And there's a very fine process of putting posters up on walls, city walls. So one is you have to make sure the Sena boys don't beat you. But that's easy because they're drunk like till 11 in the morning, so it's only, you know, they have the hangover. So at 3:34 they go home, and at 4:35 you can sort of. So I had a cycle, and the only reason I was doing this was because you know, there was sort of woman in my life, and She was political, so I had to do these posters. And that, so I had this cycle and I had this ability to put posters up. I was apparently one of the best in terms of my ratio of putting poster on wall and not getting torn. That was crucial. So that happened, and then of course, there were two things, the good news and the bad news. The bad news was Pushpa Mehta lost because, as you know, Madam Gandhi got assassinated. And then there was this big Congress wave and everybody lost their deposit, and including Pushpa Ben. And then, of course, the good news was the lady for whom I was doing all this sort of agreeing to marry me. So this is her family. So these are the Mehtas. And so till then I really didn't know who they were, and this whole new world sort of, that's Satyajit Ray and that's Kiran Mahaprasad. So I came across this other new world that just suddenly opened up for me, and that was absolutely fantastic. So I suddenly heard of Jitubhai Mehta, I heard of Harin Mehta, I heard of Kartik Mehta, I heard of Himanshu Bora, you know, people writing radio plays and so on. So Jitubhai Mehta, for those of you who don't know, has written again a Gujarati folk play. It's called Jaisal Toral. It's almost on par to Jasma Udan, for those of you who are familiar with your Gujarati theatre history. Again, a beautiful play in terms of the form. It's called Nritya Natika. Okay, has anybody heard of that? So basically what happens again, this is through recounting that I came to know of this. So you have actors on stage, and like Janta Raja, but Janta Raja is recorded with a minus track, right? Here you have professional singers off stage. So you have someone playing Jaisal's role and someone playing Toral's role, and you have an entire musical band. And everything is choreographed. So, so a lot of what Sanjay Leela Bansali does is that. Okay, the spectacle, the visual, the form, so that a lot of what is happening today in terms of your Navratri. So this whole new world sort of, and Jaisal Toral is a beautiful story, and I think there were 2 or 3 bits that were enacted, I think the first time when I went over as the bridegroom, so to speak, it was shown to me what Jaisal Toral, what is the family lineage, so to speak. So there's this beautiful story where they're going and he's a sinner. And because he's a sinner, the other people on the boat are telling that throw him off the boat, throw Jaisal off the boat. But Toral is a kind-hearted person, and she says, no, keep him. And all this is happening with singing. And he recounts his sins, and as he recounts his sin, the weight of the boat starts coming up. And then finally, she accepts him and so on. One of those like aha moments in theatre. Then there was Harin Mehta, who's again written this play and again learned a very important, so he's written a lot of popular plays, which I subsequently came to know also got adapted, not in his own name, in terms of, in Marathi and Hindi. And then when I asked Harin Bhai for the script, I asked his wife for Harin Bhai's script, she said not a single script exists. And I said, why? She said if they existed, then the other Gujarati producers would plagiarize them. So these are shows that 2 to 3, and his mantra was, Bhairao Radya Ki Nahi. So he would read the play out and then he would ask, Bhairao Radya Ki Nahi. If the ladies cried, it means the play is a super duper hit. And the third person was Kartik Mehta, and that was for me an astonishment. We are brought up in this whole thing that the writer should be tormented and he should stare at a blank canvas and then the word will come and all that. So this was Kartik Mehta sitting there and narrating 3 scripts simultaneously to 3 different people, and all of them great hits, And that is something that I sort of admire, that this felicity to be able to do that, to dictate on the spur and immediately know what works, the brevity of the word. And again, this is like the Bombay way of doing theatre, which I think is absolutely fantastic. There are more stories, but at least these are again 2 great icons from Nashik. And this is called Natya Vachan, again a very good friend of mine, Ramdas Bhatkal, who's a well-known publisher from Popular Prakashan. So Marathi, if you again look at that bookshelf, there are, like we have Faber and Faber and, the great icons that produce the great literature. You have Maus, Popular, Granthali and Rajhans. So Popular is one of the great, and most of the Marathi playwrights have been done by them. So Bhatkal Sahab has written a book, again, for some of us it's been a good book because it's been a testimony of all the playwrights he has interacted with, and of course the 2 of them come into that, I'm sure. So he goes to Pune, this is Prohibition Maharashtra, and he goes there and these are icons, these are really great people. And Bhatkal Sahab is now Bhatkal Sahab, but he was a Limbu Timbu when he goes there. So he goes there, he walks into the house and he is told that Sahib Nair, he's gone to arrange something for you for a Natya Vachan program. So Bhatkal says that we didn't have any Natya Vachan program, we have just come. I've just come to meet him and he knows that I'm going to stay, etc. and all that. And in the fine tradition of the great Marathi authors, including Tendulkar Sahab and all this, there is this thing of Darbar. So then you will have this one great writer and 7 or 8 people, and generally the evening unfolds. And then later on, we come to know in the book that Natyavachan is a code for drinking. It's a Daru session. So, so the reason to include it is because this has again been a very fine tradition in Maharashtra. And you know, even if today you go to places like Bhailas and so on, there is this whole habit of reading the play now. I think it's a long and glorious tradition, and you know, where playwrights, actors read the text constantly to each other. And sometimes I think in theatre we tend to forget that, you know, it's audience, and that till you don't hear the word, it's very, very difficult to listen. And I'll just take a small detour because I think what we tried to do somewhere with Theatre Positive was quite nice. It was a small, so we did a small little thing where I think 80 odd plays, first plays, unperformed, unpublished plays, and we did discover. And the whole idea was that playwrights read their play to an invited audience. It works because that habit is something that I think Sunil was talking about Ekshunya Bajirao over here. I mean, this is something that I think is an extraordinary. Yeah, so this is One Man Army, and I think Sushma Chai, that she's there, again, an absolutely delicious person. She's doing a Mumbai local, please attend that. She's done, I think, about 15,000 shows of a play called Savitri Bai Phule, the first modernist Marathi woman from the wife of Jyotiba Phule, but you know, Jyotiba could be called the husband of Savitri Bai. A play that I've seen, I think, at least about 25 odd times. Pula Deshpande, you know, again in the tradition of what Dickens used to do in London. And then again, you know, to go back to the previous slide, you have that tradition in Mumbai where you had readings. And again, how do you define this? Is this theatre? Is it not, you know, Atre doing a 3-hour show, Tendulkar Saab coming on stage and reading for 4 hours non-stop for an audience of 2,500 that does not move? It's pin drops. What is it? Is it a theatre performance or is it not? You know, these are questions that sometimes are. So, I mean, I've been born and brought up seeing a lot. So there's a small piece over there. What I want to talk about is this here. He's no more. He's a sort of a Malayali Brahmin who used to live in Chembur and used to perform a piece called Chakyar Koot. You know, again, Mumbai sometimes just surprises you. You know, the kind of extraordinary pluralism that's there. We, again, you know, use these words. A community. So this epitomizes. So Chakyar is a small community, and basically, before a Kathakali show or a Kutambalam at the Kutambalam in Kerala, you have a Chakyar show. So, as you know, in the good old days, when you had a Kathakali show, it would be over the, you know, it start off by sunset and go on till sunrise. So, a Chakyar Koot was like a curtain raiser, 1.5 hours, and in a very colloquial kind of Malayalam, he or she would tell the show. Now, the interesting thing was that only Chakyars could perform Chakyar Koot. And then he broke the law, and he's the non-Chakyar, and he used to perform this. And coincidentally, so I've included this because his performance was just round the corner here in Khar. And that was the first time that I had seen a non-Chakyar perform in Mumbai. And then of course, one tried to learn a little bit of the art. The art itself is very crude and straightforward. But it's just that the possibilities that it sort of, you know, provides for. Again, and this is something that again astonishes you about Mumbai. You know, suddenly there's like 2 days or 3 days ago, she's not here, Surabhi, but he was talking about, not she, but somebody else was talking about a Biraha performance that was happening. And so you have Hyder Ali has come again into Mumbai and he's performing in Kurla. And again a Sawal Jawab show, you know, 2,500-3,000 people in the audience sitting there watching this show. And you have community theatre that is happening all by itself, you know, over 4 nights, 5 nights, whatever it is. Absolutely, absolutely fascinating. So sometimes you just find that art just pours into the city and you just have.
In Germany,
yeah, that's so actually a lot of this was watched. I watched a lot of this, and that's how Maharibha is. So this is Vile Parla. So now I stay here, and I couldn't actually find a word for these. So Nissim Ezekiel, who taught us English, also taught in Midlibai, and he used to call it Wine Parla, VINE. Because of a certain kind of demographics that have happened in that particular suburb, West and East, there has been a little bit of wildness. But what I want to talk about, again, 2 or 3 things. One is, there was a time when I think there were at least 26 playwrights living in Vile Parla East alone, you know, and Tendulkar, Naushad, Cyrus, one can Shafat for some time. And we used to joke that the municipality, the BMC, is actually doing something with the water service over there, and that's why these guys are writing, because instead of chlorine, they're putting this little, chemical which makes people write plays. But the reason to include this slide was that, like I said, Mumbai astonishes you. So there was this 2-week period, and just to give you a sense, I've forgotten the name of the artist who puts the money into it, but this is at the Tilak school. So there was a music festival that was happening where, of course, you had pedigree artists, you had Ullas Kashalkar and so on. This is the Tilak Smarak ground over there. This is over 5 nights that you have for performances. So jam-packed over there. You have the buildings which are completely packed and you have. So that is going on. Then at Dinanath you have Prasad Kamli's group Bhadrakali, which is doing a week-long festival. Then at Sathe, at the same time you have Avishkar, which is doing a festival which opens with Inshallah and then goes on to something else. Then opposite Gujarat Society you have a Navratri Darbar performance that is going on. Simultaneously there is a at the hall on the other side near Gokubai side. So this is Mahabharat. Just quickly, 2 plays. That's the play I mentioned earlier called Vastraharan. It's done about 5,000 shows. It's a Bhadrakali production. Again, this fantastic playwright called Gavankar who wrote this. The script is Marwani. It's coming from a small town near Chiplum, from where Machindra came from. Again, Machindra's own trajectory in theatre is something that epitomizes the spirit of Mumbai. He's able to break, earlier I showed you that photograph of Chandra Patil and so on. Many people who have remained there because of a certain, is called a certain inequality process. So Machindra Kamli himself was, someone who used to do history ka kaam karte the. He was a part of Vijay Mehta's group, he used to do history. But he grew up, he was able to get out of that particular sort of social strata. It's very, very difficult to do that. And then, of course, create this group of this called Bhadrakali. The play itself is a farce, and it's. How many of you have seen Vastraharan here? So it's a farce. So if you've seen Jaane Bhi Do Yaro, any of you? Okay, good. So the last scene in the film is sort of an inspiration from Vastraharan. I mean, very crudely. All right. The reason I want to mention that, and of course Urubangam, is that there is a constant questioning that is going on within the system itself. Alright, so here is a play in which the play never takes place. You have a bunch of nobodies who become the actor, who become the characters, and then they perform the play. And obviously everything that is supposed to go wrong goes wrong. Alright, that's broadly what the play is about, and it's like I said, it's an absolutely eloquent part. And you have scenes where he's supposed to give the Sanskrit mantras, and obviously he's a village bumpkin, he doesn't know that. So he's Tujhe Aiche Bo Namaha, Tujhe Behinsa Namaha, Tujhe Ma Papata Namaha, whatever. So obviously there is going to be a certain kind of a protest and a reaction from the Orthodox audience. Below you have another play which is of course written 2,500–3,000 years ago called Urubanga. And I think again 100 years ago, if you go back, somebody in a small town in Kerala discovered the text by this gentleman called Bhas. And it's a short play compared to a lot of the great pantheon of Sanskrit plays. And it's about an hour in sort of duration. And those of you who know the play, it's basically about what happens to Duryodhan. And Duryodhan is not shown as a dark character, but as a heroic character. And then this is about the story about his thighs being broken and then what happened. There is also an interesting theory that when the Natya Shastra was written, it was written post Urubangam simply because it wanted to, in a way, this is just one of the theories, it could be wrong, that a lot of the mistakes that were made by Bhas in Urubangam should not be repeated by the subsequent playwrights. And then you actually had a series of do's and don'ts of what playwrights should be doing. And that is something that has constantly happened, that there is this sort of praxis which exists where you're being constantly told, do this, don't do this, and don't do this. But occasionally you have a gem like Vastraharan. I just share a small little anecdote. Obviously there was protest against this play. The Hindu right got very upset that how dare you, blah blah blah. And I think what happened is that they came, so they threatened, and then they finally came on stage to sort of stop the show, because obviously there's a certain defilement of the Hindu gods and the Hindu tradition and so on. But a couple of things happened. One is, when you're talking of Pandavas and Kauravas, there's a sizable number of people on stage, so you need that many people to come on stage as well. The second thing was when the protesters reached the stage, they said, "Yana kasam aa raha hai, hita apne dev aaye." And the second thing that happened was that post-show, the protest continued. And Machindra, he of course got, he had the backing of Sula Deshpande, who gave that extraordinary speech about the play, etc. But when the shows were happening outside and the protesters would come, he would make sure that in the due ceremony and everything, that batata pova and chai would go to them, but there was a process where somebody would go with a ganti and go and offer it to the protesters. Ki te aapne pahune aaye and we have to sort of serve them. So he made an occasion of the protest. I mean, this is one way of, sort of hitting back. Machindra, of course, was well back. He had the backing of, Sharad Pawar and so on. But the fact of the matter is that there is a strategy of doing things. In art, sometimes you need to also have a little sort of bilateral route. This is again a fine friendship. Sorry for that really eerie photo. In addition to One Act, I myself have been able to write a lot of radio plays. This is again one of those fortuitous accidents when there was somebody by the name of Prince, who's now in Trivandrum, who got me to commission me, and then I wrote. And while I was at All India Radio, I suddenly realized that it's actually a huge repository of fantastic work. So again, a lot of what I've been trying to do today is sharing whatever one has learned, picked up, etc. But we somewhere, I think, forget that AIR has actually been instrumental in a lot of things. So Hindustani classical music, plays has been the other thing which I think there is a good amount of recordings that they have. So right from, of course, the great Adi Mazban, and then there are old-timers that you meet at AIR who tell me that Mumbai came to a standstill. I mean, people talk of Mahabharata on a Sunday morning, but Wednesday morning I think was Adi Mazban, plus a whole lot of other playwrights. And then, of course, thanks to Prince, I got to hear some of those recordings there. Absolutely well recorded. I mean, it's really exceptional, the quality of recording, and I'm absolutely baffled as to why AIR doesn't replay these things. And good texts performed by some great actors in English, in Marathi, in Gujarati. You have legends who have come in. You also have Mama director coming and sitting in front of a mic. The recording has not yet begun. Yeah, Khampa sab aur mala bolaicha hai ka. Audience today hai. So fantastic thing. But the fact of the matter is, it's I think a part of our history which we need to go back before some idiot. So that's my school. That's round the corner. So there were two guys from school who were supposed to come. That's Shivaji Mandir. So actually an interesting journey that one has had from school, and we celebrated our sesquicentennial last year, and I'd gone for church service, so I'm atheist, but it's while sitting in that church, St. Peter's Church, and I realized that one of the things that school did, I mean, it taught me a lot of terrible things. Salman Khan is from my school, so but one of the things that my school I think one of the things we learned at school is music. It's while sitting over there for those 3 to 4 hours during church service, I realized that so the choir service is supposed to be very good. I mean, there will be other parishes who may disagree, but just the sheer caliber of Western classical tradition that one is something that I would never have been exposed to. But one got the opportunity to listen to that, and that was it. I'm going to deviate. Shivaji Mandir is some place all of us should go to. There's a long bit of story, but while coming here today, so I used to stay right around the corner, and I had a friend. So this is a little memory thing. So his name is Robert Matthews. He's no more. He used to work at Metal Box, and he started something called the Smiley's Gang. That reflects S better than this. So Smiley is the character from the Jean Le Carre book called the Smiley series. And we basically used to sit there in that Irani restaurant where now you have Delhi. So there was an Irani there, and on the first floor Mahmood used to be. This is 33rd Road corner. And so all of us used to basically read stuff out of John Smiley books. And Robert Matthews, I don't know why, had a bunch of very, very strange friends. So we had somebody called Mandy. He was called Mandy because he used to pop Mandrax pills. Then there was somebody called Sheikh Chilli who used to steal water pumps, but was basically an extra for Bollywood films and so on. A bunch of really interesting guys. One of the guys we knew, he used to run a kind of a bar cum brothel called Caesar's Palace. And he used to run a chain of these all over the city, and the idea was we would all go there and visit, etc. And at that point of time, there was this guy who, so I was fairly young, and the bigger guys would get busy with the action elsewhere on the upper floor. So, and this guy would come and start talking to me. His name was Mirza Saab. And he would be completely sloshed and would tell me stories, fabulous stories. So this would happen once a week or twice a week and so on. And so I probably, this was gone for 2 to 3 years, and these stories I had heard, about Mumbai, absolutely beautiful stories. Cut to about 15 years later, I happened to read Premchand for the first time, and I realized that Mirza Sahab had basically told me all Premchand's stories and his own version. He inserted himself in each of these stories, that he just told me the story. Cut to another 5 years later, I was doing a small film with Saeed Mirza, and I realized Mirza Sahab writes songs for him. And then I confronted, so this was for a children's film, and then I confronted him and I said, "Aapne mujhe aise bhuttu banaya." He said, "Nahi, main wo nahi tha." So, but again, a fascinating character because he lives in Dharavi, and he took me to his house because it's one of those houses in the nalas, literally, and you have two ways to enter. One is through a door like this, the other is if you walk onto the nala, you slip in through the window. And then inside his house, you have probably 3 times more the number of books inside this. Again, he's no more, and I just thought while passing, I sort of remembered him. So, just a memory. But fabulous. Terraces, yeah. So again, I have a theory. I mean, we have, I think, 2 of my friends who are architects here, Nikhil Khadekar, Gnanish. So they talk a lot of this urban theory, which half the time I don't get. But basically, I think there is, we have this concept in Mumbai which we call empty space phobia. Right? Every time there is some kind of empty space, we want to fill it up, either put a car there or put a building there. And then over many years, you sort of draw a pattern that a lot of the theatre in Mumbai has probably been possible because of the way it was determined by the space. It's one of the things that, again, we've had sort of big discussions on why Chabildas was successful. I mean, if you look at the space per se, the odds are so overwhelmingly against that kind of a space. But I think one of the main reasons why it succeeded was it was probably about 500 meters to about 800 meters in sort of proximity to Shivaji Mandir. So it was obviously making a very pointed sort of, what should one say, argument against the kind of performances you are having against Shivaji Mandir. And that seemed to be the theme that got reflected, whether it was Sahitya Sangha, whether it was Jambori Maidan, so that you have something as an alternative which is constantly going on. And that is the thing, that in Mumbai, like you have the Western Railway, Central Railway and so on, you always have 4 or 5 tracks that are constantly moving sharply against each other and each making a point again. And that traction and that energy is required, otherwise it's not. This is thankfully possible because I think 2 or 3 months ago I was in Delhi, and very coincidentally I could attend the Ibrahim Alkazi show there, which was absolutely fascinating. I knew very little about his work except of what had happened in Delhi. Obviously very little about what his work was in Mumbai, and I think a few things completely astonished me. One is just the sheer breadth of documentation. It is absolutely beautifully documented. I hope to bring the show to Mumbai. We don't have a space to host it, but have you seen the show in Delhi? Yeah. We don't have probably NGMA, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, that is that, and just the meticulousness with which each single detail has been brought into. And the second thing that sort of strikes you is also, of course, we've been hearing these things about the Renaissance man and so on. And you realize that the truly great theatre people of this city have been people who've been doing multiple things, scientist in theatre, doctor in theatre, and so on. And that has been the contribution. The other thing was that, and this came again as a big sort of surprise to me, and again affirms one of the theories, is that when he went to the National School of Drama in Delhi, it was Mama Varerkar who had sort of given him a very strong recommendation, etc. And then of course the Wheels of Power Churn and so on. And that is again something, if you look at the really good work that's happened when you're talking about the top 100 plays or the top 100 theatre people in the city, it's usually been collaboration between 2 different cultures, when 2 grades come together. And again, if you at Mumbai local, again you will get a sense of that. But so when you have a Mama Varerkar backing and Alkazi, you realize that the possibilities are that much more. Unfortunately, very little of that is happening. So we were having a conversation when I used to come to DSM at Sahitya Sangha, where Jahan runs his course. You suddenly realize while you're wandering around those areas and into the alleys and so on, that you actually had 2 suburbs that existed. You had Girangaon and you had Girgaon, and they were happily sort of not aware of each other's existence. And that sometimes frightens you, that if that can happen to 2 suburbs which are just next to each other, why are they not sort of borrowing from each other? So that's frightening, and the fact that there is so much. So this is, so there are a bunch of other plays. This was a small little collection I picked up again by Ashok Vajpayee of children's plays, and I realized that this is a huge lacuna that we have in terms of really play text for children. Tendulkar Sahab has of course written some very fine plays. Vrinda Karandikar has written some fantastic children's poems which I think can be adapted as plays. But again, this is an area where documentation and also I think commission work, I think we require a lot more. So, sorry, this is a cheat. So this is, that's Varavara Rao, that's Arun Ferrara. Arun Ferrara was my junior in school, and again, this was a book launch. But the reason to include that are those two photographs over there. So this is the other cultural. So that is, you know, again, twice or thrice I've referred to this place called Jambori Maidan. So again, that little photograph that you see over there is of great historical importance. In 1938 or 39, if you recall the initial photographs of Dange and so on, this is part of that pantheon. So the first Kamgar Rangbhumi festival happened over there, right, in that little ground. It's a huge ground. Typically, it would go on for about 18 days to 20 days. You would have about 4 to 5 plays per night, starting from the evening going on till the morning. And typically tickets would be 1 rupee, 2 rupees and so on. If you were a theatre person or a trade union person, I think it was real. And so who were the guys who were performing? Mainly, as I told you, all these mills were there, 150 odd mills, they had trade unions. Each of these trade unions had cultural wings, and each of these cultural wings had a theatre division. And then that theatre division would mount these plays. So of course, because they started off in the late 30s, a lot of the plays had to do with the Indian freedom struggle. It had to do with certain issues which had to do with the World War and, you know, resource gathering for that and so on. But a lot of the plays were also having to do with conditions, say, back in the hinterland in Maharashtra. Some of these were also migrants from UP, Bihar, etc. And so that is what has happened. Obviously, as the mill movement and the left movement started sort of disintegrating, a lot of these the Kamgar Rangbhumi is also, even today it happens, but it's not done with the same level of seriousness. Vidrohi is again something you should be aware of. In the mid 70s or so, as you know, the Dalit Panther movement has started. It was an offshoot of, it was sort of heavily inspired by the Black Panther movement of the US. And in that there were two main streams, and again this you should be aware of because this is something that, you know, the city owns. One is a very strong Ambedkarite Marxist movement, and the other was a very strong Ambedkarite Buddhist movement. All right. Cut to 20 years later, this movement had divided itself into multiple factions, and like Kamgar Rangbhumi, you had innumerable small factions, and so divisions that had happened within there. So each of them had cultural groups, but they were fragmented and so on. Again, very interesting. This happened with the left. It also happened with the Ambedkarites. Is that the top leadership may not have been on talking terms with each other, but the cadre were always talking to each other. And there's a lot of work that was going on at the bottom of the pyramid and not up there. In the 90s, and again, this is similar to what happens with Vastra Haran, because this is the kind of cultural resistance that we talk about. You know, sometimes Bombay does make you proud. So this is 95, 96, Shiva Sena, BJP come to power. This is the first time now. And if you recall, the Sahitya Academy had, not Natya Parishad, the Sahitya Parishad was happening at Shivaji Mandir, Shivaji Park. And if those of you had followed what had happened over then, there was a kind of assumption that power belonged to the man who lives in Matoshri, and writers have to pay obeisance to that. And one or two of the Marathi writers like Pula and so on had sort of raised their voices, but it was up to a point. So that was going on, and the whole thing had kind of degenerated into a farce where, you know, chief ministers, and that is how it had begun, this pratha of chief ministers coming onto the stage and so on. Otherwise they maintained a distance that, right, you know, what the fine tradition of Bhakti Shakti has always been in Maharashtra. So this was going on, and at that point of time, the Vidrohi movement, which it got its second lease of life post the Dalit Panther movement, realized that they needed to break away with this because they could not be seen associating themselves or getting associating themselves or with state patronage. So they organized an alternative literary festival. This literary festival was organized in Dharavi. And by then Lok Satta and all these papers, mainstream Marathi newspapers have, publishing the recipe, कि तिकडे शीरा मिळणार आहे, उपमा मिळणार आहे. So these guys deliberately say तिकडे beef मिळणार आहे, इकडे mutton मिळणार आहे, कच्चा होणार वगैरे. And then of course the thing began, and you have the greats come there, and the same thing. I mean, of course, ultimately the seriousness of the work itself, people came, read their poems, a lot of resistance work and so on. And the greats were of course there, right from, Surve, Dasal, of course, Sambhaji Bhagat and so on. So that happened. So this is again something, so when, for the first time when one had encountered Vidrohi there, you again ask yourself this fundamental question, whose art and who are the people? Because the number of people over there were as much as at Shivaji Park. But we found a complete sort of silence in any of the newspapers, any of the reporters. There was, the quality of literature was as good, as bad. But still, there was this sort of strange and eerie silence that sort of was there all over. Yeah, so that's again a hero of mine. So again, interesting, that's Vinda Karandekar, the man from Kokar, and started off by being going to an RSS Shala, and then of course went to the left. And it's an interesting story because some of the great pantheons started off left, gone to right, and some of the greats have gone from right to extreme left. He's adapted two of Shakespeare's plays. One is Raja Lear and the other is Macbeth. What I've done is, there's a little bit in Marathi which he's reading out here. Let's see if you can hear this.
आणि एक शेवटची लहानशी कविता. तुकोबाच्या भेटी शेक्सपियर आला. तुकोबाच्या भेटी शेक्सपियर आला, तो झाला सोहळा दुकानात. दुकानात शेक्सपियरचं दुकान असण्याची शक्यता नाही, त्याचं होतं थिएटर म्हणून. आणि तिकडचा कवी तो इंग्लंड मधला, त्याच्या मालकीचं थिएटर. तुकाराम आमचा कवी, त्याच्या मालकीचं एक ते दुकान होतं. तुकोबाच्या भेटी शेक्सपियर आला, तो झाला सोहळा दुकानात. झाली दोघांची उराउरी भेट. उराउरी भेट ही वारकरी सगळी तुम्हाला माहिती आहे. उराउरी भेट असं शेक हँड वगैरे करत नाही, नमस्कार करत नाही, उराउरी भेटण्याची पद्धत आहे. तेव्हा झाली दोघांची उराउरी भेट, उरातले थेट उरामध्ये. तुका म्हणे विलियम शेक्सपियर, तुका म्हणे विल्या तुझे कर्म थोर. तुका म्हणे विल्या तुझे कर्म थोर, अवघाची संसार उभा केला. शेक्सपियर म्हणे अरे बाबा एक ते राहिले. शेक्सपियर म्हणे एक ते राहिले, तुवा जे पाहिले विटेवरी. संसारात जे म्हणून काय आहे, मानवी संसारामध्ये माणसाच्या ते सगळं शेक्सपियरनं पकडलंय आणि उभं केलंय समर्थपणा. पण एक आध्यात्मिक जी भावना आहे, ही आध्यात्मिक भावना तिथे त्याला कुठेही खऱ्या अर्थानं प्रगट करता आलेली नाही. ती शेक्सपियरची मर्यादा आहे. काय म्हणून तो म्हणतोय, शेक्सपियर म्हणे एक ते राहिले, तुवा जे पाहिले विटेवरी. तुका म्हणे बाबा ते तुवा बरे केले. तुका म्हणे बाबा ते तुवा बरे केले, त्याने तडे गेले संसाराला. विठ्ठल अट्टल त्याची रीत न्यारी, माझी पाटी कोरी लिहोनिया. किती जरी त्याच्याबद्दल लिहिलं तरी शेवटी खऱ्या अर्थानं आपण काही लिहितच नाही. तेव्हा विठ्ठल अट्टल त्याची रीत न्यारी, माझी पाटी कोरी लिहोनिया. शेक्सपियर म्हणे अरे तुझ्या शब्दामुळे मातीत खेळले शब्दातीत. तुझ्या शब्दामुळे मातीत खेळले शब्दातीत. तुका म्हणे ऐक घंटा ही मंदिरी. तुका म्हणे गड्या वृथा शब्दपीठ. तुका म्हणे गड्या वृथा शब्दपीठ. प्रत्येकाची वाट वेगळाली. वेगळीये पाटे वेगळाले काटे. वेगळीये वाटे वेगळाले काटे. काट्या संगे भेटे पुन्हा तोच. तुका म्हणे ऐक घंटा ही मंदिरी. दुकान बंद करून घरी जायचं, त्याची वेळ झाली, देवळातली घंटा म्हणजे तुका म्हणे ऐक घंटा ही मंदिरी, कजागीळ घरी वाट पाहे, दोघे निघून या गेले दोन दिशा, कवतिक आकाशा आवरेना.
That's Vrinda, and again with Shakespeare, I think it's been a fantastic journey. So with Shakespeare, it's been a great. Some of us joke that he's Indian because his name is actually Shakespeare. So, and which is why you have something like about 1500 odd plays of Shakespeare, and it's interesting if you look at even Betab and Agash Rahasni, and you were reading some of his texts, like Raja Lear, he has actually modified and made it into a happy ending, you know. Then with Gertrude, I think he's done something very fantastic because he realized that it might offend the sensibility of the audience. Instead of having sort of poison in the wine, she drinks a glass of cold milk, you know, like Anna Rosa. So again, the way Shakespeare has been used, there's an interesting story. I'll just quickly, and then we'll conclude. The last two alphabets are short. So Vrinda, of course, had won the Jnanpith Award, and there was a very dear friend of ours, Chetan Datar, and we were huge fans of his. And Chetan had just got me to learn Dhondya Navi. It's one of his brilliant pieces. So the whole idea was that he would be in front of me, and I will, as a fan, sort of say it out. We didn't know about the Jnanpith, and he had come down and he was standing over there. He was buying limbu from the thing, and of course I started off, and as you can see, I'm not very good at speaking. So I stood in front of him trying to say this Dhondya Navi, and I think after the second line I really goofed up the thing, and he had this incredulous look on his face. We giggled because, I mean, we are 45, but we just behaved like children, and we had a fan moment and we ran away. Next day in the paper we come to know that he had of course won the Jnanpith, and Kumar Ketkar had walked in there, I think it was Vilasrao Deshmukh, and because Vrinda is Vrinda, he said, "Ek second, tumhara nimbu sharbat hava hai ka?" So they said, okay, not realizing that they thought that he'd probably get someone in the kitchen to make it. He had gone down to the bazaar to buy the nimbu, and at that moment of serendipity, we caught him. So yeah, but he was a fantastic, I mean, absolute genius. Yeah. So this is a bit by a British official. He's the police commissioner. This is for a play. If you read this, you'll get a sense. 1917, and this was two plays. One is an adaptation of Neel Darpan, which was banned. This was again post 1857. The DPA had been enforced, and this is what happened. And the other was a play called, I think, Raja Manohar Rao or something. If you read this, this can be easily applied for any of the works that are sort of on today. This particular act, the DPA, has been enforced since the last 150 years, and just sort of half. I mean, it came in with the whole colonial process, 1857. Then, of course, like I told you, the constitution of the Indian National Congress, and then subsequently whatever happened, formal and informal performances. So much so that at a point of time when Kasturba's funeral was happening at Aga Khan Palace, that was of course used as a sort of secret Shok Sabha, because I mean, as you know, most of the Congress were arrested, they were inside jail as part of the Quit India movement, and that particular funeral procession was used as that. So there's even a law that sort of can technically get you arrested for attending a funeral meeting or a condolence meeting. Alright? Today we have something like 132 odd laws if you sort of study the various provisions and subject whatever. Which means that any gathering in this state today can be declared as sort of illegal, and you can be declared as an enemy of the state. That continues. The only thing that has happened is the laws have got sharper, and the rules and the technicalities have become more powerful. The extension is that you can also take it right up to UAPA, where it can make it a kind of a non-bailable offence. So it is not just a question of prevention of a particular performance, but also make it non-bailable. So as you can see, the process of empowerment goes on. Even an innocent gathering like today's can be declared as an illegal public gathering, which is a sort of thing of the state. And that is something that is. So this is the law and the premise from where it's coming from. This is the origin and the beyond. Again, like I said, in the theatre there has been instances where people have beaten the system, but it's again just tremendously tiring to do it. Like I said, so I was in Indore and I came to know, I was telling you about those curtains that are dropped in between. So you had these, Sangeet Natak like Kichakwad and all these great plays. So they used to use mythological plays to make these allegorical attack against the British government. So Kichakwad is, as you know what the story is,
but they used that to sort of make it an attack against Lord Curzon. But when the British or the officials came to be aware of even that, then gradually, as I told you, the curtains were being dropped and there would be messages written on that. So again, we met somebody in Indore, who actually knows where, because one of the traveling companies had been traveling from Gulbarga and so on, and then those curtains have also got confiscated. So now we are trying to retrace if we can find some of those old curtains. That would again be marvelous. But it's normally the way the jugaad in which theatre is. Some of you may know this gentleman. This is a group which was called Rangayan and then went on to become Avishkar. He's a one-man army. His name is Sitaram Kumbhar, and he single-handedly can fold and do sets. They right now operate outside a very dingy municipal school in Mahim, and a lot of the great avant-garde work in Marathi has been performed by this group, and this gentleman has been instrumental in actually setting up the setting up the sets and the construction for that. Again, a wonderful storyteller if you spend time with him, because again, a very, very sharp thing. What is amazing is the profession, who he was. Again, he'd come to Mumbai, he started selling vegetables, and then obviously realized that that was not a good profession for him in terms of remuneration, and then came into the theatre, and then subsequently what he did. His talent is the ability to use minimal props, furniture and toolkit, and be able to put and create these fantastic sets that you see, and be able to do that within 5 minutes and 10 minutes. Because Chabaldas, if you realize, was on the second and third floor. There was a school that was going on till evening. You had about 2 hours of setup time, and then within that 2 hours, you not only had to vacate the space, bring your wooden planks, whatever it is, get it there, somebody's living room, somebody's working class chawl, whatever it is. So this is what he does. And again, this is a question that we look at. That if sometimes we talk to a lot of young people and we wonder what is the future of theatre, what is it? So if you look at the classic, I mean, use something very pompous up there, neoclassical model and all that. But basically the growth theory, that if there is going to be growth theory, it is basically going to ensure that something that is low profit can become high profit. And if that is going to start happening, it will also mean that there is migration of labor from a lower form of work to a better and more evolved form of work. And this is, I think, the question that we need to, that how can we ensure the betterment of somebody like a Sitaram Kumbhar, that the kind of work he does gets greater value, accrues greater value. Why is it that he remains a nobody and somebody in the larger panel? I mean, Atul Kulkarni, when he does his theatre festival, invites him, but that is more out of his own personal contact, and he rings. So he's supposed to ring the third, we have this tradition of the first bell, the second bell and the third bell. So he rings the third bell, and apparently he rings it so well that it can be heard across 2 districts of Mumbai. And he says that that is something he's learned from Dr. Lamu, because the first time when he did it very apologetically, like the leftists, the Lal Salam, Lal Salam. He does it like the Kanhaiya way. But again, an absolute joy. These photographs have been shot by a DSM student, Roshan Matthew. And this is a small little booklet that he's made, and it's absolutely a joy to go through that project. It's about, I think, 24 odd pages where he's followed Sitaramji over a couple of weeks and basically try to understand the work ethics and the process. And also, we're talking about 40 years of theatre history. I'm not working with the viewers.
So why for the question why? Answer it why for the question why?
Yeah.
Sorry,
I had to ask. I had to ask, sorry.
I don't have a good copy of it. Yeah, so that's it from me. I have some homework for you all. This is only for those. So I got some postcards. So the whole idea of this exercise was also an outreach. So these are some stories. These are a few things that I have collected. I know that there are thousands and thousands of stories. Whoever I talk to has a theatre story. So I picked up some postcards. They're very cheap. So I'm going to distribute them to those of you who are interested. If you have a theatre story, good, bad, indifferent, whatever it is, you can jot them on this, probably, give it to Junoon or whatever, or to me. And it would be nice just as part of a larger theatre collection, because I think we need more stories, and there are fantastic stories in this great city of ours.
Questions? We're open for questions, conversations, discussions.
Okay.
And,
Miss Palika, can you use the mic, please?
do I have to?
Yeah, we could not hear you.
I'm attending the program, yeah, for the first time. I simply love your presentation. But especially, why I wanted to say was, especially because the way you connected, the Marathi, I mean, this is for basically a non-Marathi speaking audience, I suppose. And the question which one always felt when I was young, that why is it that Khanolkar, a great poet like Khanolkar, is not known to anybody in Mumbai? I mean, I love Mumbai being a cosmopolitan place, and I'm basically not a Marathi person, but still, I used to feel, why is it that people are not giving importance to Marathi writers? Only Maharashtrians are doing. But why is it that in Calcutta everybody learns Bengali and then knows everything? Whereas here, I used to ask other friends and they say, oh, I don't even know one word of Marathi, and they used to be very proud of that. And I used to get a bit upset. Then of course Shivsena came and sort of used the whole thing. So then one became sort of embarrassed in saying that no, Marathi should get more importance, Marathi theatre, Marathi poetry, Marathi literature. Others must at least know about it. So on this platform, you were able to connect the two, and all this I really liked. And another thing was when Hanuman Theatre existed, I'm talking about the late 60s and early 70s, I was doing some work. So for that, I used to attend there, and even actors like Madhu Kambikar, they used to all dance there. And at that time I had interviewed a lot of people. So I'll just check if I have some recorded music of Mithabai and all those, if I have it still, because frankly, storing all that becomes very difficult, then I pass it on to Sunil. So it really made me very nostalgic. So thank you so much.
Khanolkar actually, when he passed away recently, again that was in.
Can you use the mic?
This is not an answer or any, just an observation, but when Mangesh Patwankar had passed away, so they had, I think, organized 3 jalsas, not Shoksabar, 3 jalsas for him. And what was astonishing was, I think, 2 of them I had attended. One was in Parla East, again at Tilak, and then there was another one near the Savarkar Hall and another one. But the one in Parla East, there were about 1,500–1,600 people seated there, and you had about, went on for 4 hours. I reached there, so the program was to start at about 6 in the evening. I reached at 5:30 thinking I should get a good seat. By the time I had reached all 600, whatever, 1,000 odd seats in the front were taken. And it wasn't as if there were celebrities on stage or anything. You had a 4-hour program that went on. Not only that, but you also had people who were reciting the poems and, as part of a collective memory, many things, Prem Manje Prem Manje Prem, and right from stuff like that to a lot of the others, Naisargik Kavita and so on and so forth. And if you look at the cross-section of people, they were all, of course 80% of them were Maharashtrian, but a few of them were cosmopolitan.
That's happening now.
Yeah, no, but I think that's healthy. And I think what's happening, whatever is happening quietly. That seems to be the concern. And it's like really intelligent, progressive, people with sense of humor seem to be less silent now. But I think they're there. I don't think one needs to be disheartened. So even the other day we were there at a Kannada Sabha program, same thing. Lots and lots of people there.
Maybe both translated.
Like Vinda, what he said, if you translate that into English, you ruin it. So, but YouTube is there. YouTube rocks.
I just had a question. Now, when you look at the history, the geography of Gujarat and Maharashtra, I mean, Gujarat was covered by the Marathis as well, like the Baroda kingdom and things. So how is theatre and art? Did it separate off when the British came by? I mean, how did all of that? Are they being tied? I mean, like you talk about melting pots, right? I mean, Mumbai is a melting pot. I saw examples of Kerala. You used examples there.
In terms of Gujarati language, it's the second language of the city.
Right.
So Marathi being the first. In terms of theatre plays, again, numbers, I don't have all the numbers with me, but if you look at it, it will be about 600 to 700 Marathi shows and about 300 odd Gujarati, and then subsequently the other languages, English and then Hindi comes into play. So that is one aspect of it. You have about 8 auditoriums in Mumbai which are only Gujarati dedicated. So Gavarden, Bhaidas to a large extent is dominated by Gujarati community. So that's a very, they have their own system and mechanism and economics. Then in terms of melting pot, I mean the best melting pot is if you go into the old Paidoni belt and the old Bindi Bazar area. I mean in that small circumference of 2 kilometers, you will probably hear a language called Kachi. And you won't just hear Kachi, you will hear about 17 variations of Kachi. Kachi, Lohana Kachi, Nagori Kachi, Memini Kachi. So it is a language of trade, and because it's a language of trade, it has its own codes and systems which are sort of developed things like that. But there is again a very strong population over here, and the shows happen. The only thing is all of these are there's this interesting metaphor that some of us use that when Mumbai, the Portuguese, the British and so on, then we were 7 islands, okay, and then of course the city was retained, redeveloped, etc. And then the genesis of Mumbai as a city and whatever else that happened to it. Today the danger that is happening and what you suggested is that we are returning to that position of being 7 islands again. But only thing is it is language-based ghettos. It's not physical, geographically demarcated islands, but you're talking of ghettos of language or culture. So you could be living all your life in Mamdali Road and not knowing what's happening in Juhu. You could be living in Gujarat, in a Gujarati community, gated community in Ghatkopar and not knowing what's happening in other parts of the city. That danger has arisen, and today the way a certain kind of city structure that we are encountering, the danger is that might get exaggerated, which is why this sort of becomes extremely important, because we are talking of art and culture are things which have grown along with the city. When we are talking of a mill coming along with that, you are also talking of or a school being built or a bazaar being created. You are also talking of many things that are being created along with it. You are destroying all that. That is a big concern.
You ended with Vrindavan. So today we are in a digital era. The idea of Vrindavan is keeping things alive, moved beyond just physical. So what is your particular idea of Vrindavan for theatre? Yes.
I mean, it sort of evolves, right? So for me, I think a very, very good example is, this is a very selfish example, and I'm sorry I keep referring to this, but I think what happened in JNU a few months ago was very interesting, because, and then with the overreaction that we found by the government and so on. But what happened after that, which is again, gone a bit quiet, but suddenly you have the best academics in the country, the best cultural theorists in the country, the best thinkers in the country, coming and giving those public talks at the JNU Square or whatever they call that, places. And for someone like me who is frankly speaking an illiterate and a completely untutored boy, I never got admission in a JNU and IIT. But for me, on a digital platform, I am able to listen to fantastic voices of reason and even discourses on Indian anthropology, Indian social theory. I get to hear Partha Chatterjee, I get to hear Thorat. These are people I will never have access to in Shimla Institute and so on. Someone who's giving me a great discourse on Charta theory and so on. So that is the big advantage. The more and more the repression is, the more and more there is a possibility of student movement being able to respond. And this is, being able to use that in a very savvy kind of a way. It's a very crude technology. Somebody is there, you have some great thinker like, Purushottam Agarwal talking about Buddhist theory, and there's a dog wandering around, but it does not deter. The fact is the consciousness of high thought is there. It reaches out. And for me, that is equally as powerful a mechanism as any other. And suddenly it has opened up. It may not be, it has not gone viral like an MNN video or anything. You still have about 1 lakh odd people listening to these lectures, which otherwise they would not have been interested in this. Suddenly there's an access to this. Documentary filmmakers are struggling, short filmmakers are struggling. Suddenly this has just a lecture of 90 minutes, which is just pedagogy, serious pedagogy. I think that's fantastic. So huge self-goal by the government, as most governments are there. That's silly. So this has been waiting to happen. So.
You said more plays, and like a lot of people when you go to see a live performance, nothing really compares to that experience, right? But what is your take on, like, you're on live stream right now on Facebook. What is your take on that? Like, the difference between actually watching a live performance or accessing it across on the internet? I mean, what is it? Do you agree with that, or do you still feel that no, people should be like puritans and go and watch those plays? Translating a live performance on a digital platform, translating a live performance on a YouTube.
We have a great writer called Vijayan who's written this book on the Kathak legends. So he has adapted that as a stage performance, and this performance is happening in a small town, not small, a fairly mid-sized town called Kodaikanallur. It's about 4 hours in duration, and you have about 1,500-2,000 people who are watching this show. And the play starts with everybody, the actors entering with fire mashals, and then it's a beautiful Marquesian kind of a story which he has brought onto the stage. He uses a lot of live music which is there from Kerala. And of course he's using a little bit of AV, and it's like the old traditional Greek theatre with a lot of elements from Kerala. So you're sitting and watching there with that audience 4 hours, because these actors who have landed, the theatre troupe that landed there, worked with the villagers of Kodaikanallur and involved them, because they needed to raise money, they needed to get the infrastructure right, because it's a huge meza. Incomparable. You can't suffer. Birju Maharaj giving a twirl on stage, Rashid Khan Saab just taking one mukra. Incomparable. So that goes at another level also. That's like, it's like experiencing God if you are a believer.